All right, today we're going to deconstruct a pretty provocative theory about the climate crisis, and we're drawing it directly from one particular source. Our whole goal here is just to walk you through its claims step by step, so you can see for yourself exactly how this argument gets built.
So the whole argument we're looking at kicks off with this very question. The idea it presents is that one of the biggest challenges we face today, well, it wasn't just stumbled upon. It was supposedly invented on purpose, all to achieve a very specific goal.
And this single sentence, this is the knockout punch. It's the conclusion of the core piece of evidence in this argument. Pretty powerful stuff, right? Figuring out how the source gets here is the key to understanding the entire thing. So let's dive in and break it down.
And just so we're all on the same page, our job here is simply to unpack the logic from this one specific source. We're not taking sides, not endorsing it, not debunking it. We're just laying out the claims and the evidence it uses so you can see for yourself how the whole thing is put together. Okay, so where does this all start? The source takes us back to the 1970s, to a document from a pretty influential think tank called the Club of Rome. In this one report, mankind at the turning point is basically presented as the bedrock for this entire theory. So the source frames this quote as a kind of diagnosis. This is the starting point for the argument, the idea that humanity itself was identified as a planetary disease way back then. And that framing? It's the absolute first crucial step in the logic of this whole theory. So, according to this source, if you've diagnosed man as the cancer, well, what's the treatment? The text hones in on this one phrase from that same report, a global resources allocation system, and presents that as the proposed cure. But you gotta ask, what does that even mean? And who's in charge?
Well, the source gives us its own definition. It says this system is really just a fancy word for technocracy. You know, a setup where technical experts, not elected leaders, have total top-down control over all the world's resources, and, by extension, all the people. That's a huge idea, and the source is claiming that's the ultimate endgame here.
Okay, now we're getting to the real heart of it. This next part is where the source pulls out what it considers its smoking gun, the absolute linchpin of its claim that this whole crisis was cooked up on purpose. The whole idea here, according to the source, is pretty simple. If you want to bring in a global system of control, you first need a giant global problem to solve, and the source argues that the next document it's about to quote shows the deliberate search for exactly that kind of problem. And here we go. The source presents this quote almost like a confession. It zooms in on that key phrase, "We came up with the idea." Not "we discovered," not "we identified," but "we came up with." This is presented as proof positive that these threats were handpicked or even invented because they were the perfect fit for a common enemy.
And boom, that's how the argument comes full circle. The source ties this quote right back to where we started. See, these invented threats are super useful because they're all caused by human intervention. And that in turn supposedly confirms that the real enemy was and always has been humanity itself.
But the argument doesn't just stay in the realm of theory. The source then tries to build a bridge from this alleged philosophy to something very real and very influential, the creation of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. So this timeline basically lays out the source's alleged chain of events. It's presented as a clear progression. Step 1, the problem is identified, it's humanity. Step 2, a unifying enemy is invented, global warming. And step 3, the source claims a key player, Maurice Strong, helps establish the institution to push that very cause.
And here's the final and maybe most critical connection the source tries to make. It claims the IPCC wasn't set up to do impartial science. Nope. It was supposedly created with one specific mission: to give the stamp of approval to legitimize the crisis that was already chosen, the idea that industrial CO2 was the bad guy behind global warming.
Okay, so we've looked at the diagnosis, the so-called invention of an enemy, and the link to a major global institution. Let's just step back and put it all together. What is the core argument we've just unpacked here? So, in a nutshell, the argument goes like this. A global elite supposedly identified humanity as the problem. To justify their preferred solution, a top-down technocracy, they allegedly invented a common enemy, climate change. And then they created the IPCC to sell this manufactured crisis to the world. That's the whole theory. And you can see, if you were to accept that, it would change how you look at pretty much everything.
And that really brings us to the final thought here. After breaking down this source, we're left with a really challenging question it puts on the table. If you take its premise at face value, that the real enemy is humanity itself,
Then what does that imply about the solutions that would be designed to fight that enemy? It's definitely a provocative question to chew on.